Welcome to AMT's Standard Bank Fresh Produce Overview. In this week's episode, proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa, we look at the latest price movements with tomatoes 31% higher week on week. We also look at the week ahead and discuss why most prices can drop again this week. All in this week's episode, so make sure to stay tuned. Our biggest movers for the week was tomatoes with a 31% jump in prices, while blueberry prices dropped by more than 32% week on week. I think we must look out for the lower demand this week on the markets. It can put pressure on most prices again. But with that, let's dive into the latest prices of the past week. The national average potato price increased slightly last week, as was expected, to an average price of R52.61 per 10 kilogram bag. Large potatoes traded lower at R60, mediums at R51 and smalls at R34. Mondials increased to 49, while Cifras came in at R63 on average. The average price for Class 1 potatoes across all sizes and markets was on R58. For this week, we expect volumes to stay higher and demand to drop off as we enter the middle parts of this month. Prices will likely remain lower in July and August, but expect prices to pick up from September onwards as volumes start to decrease over that period. The average onion price decreased by 8% last week to R70.82 per 10 kilogram bag and is now 15% lower than a year ago. Brown onions averaged on R73, red onions decreased to R147 and white onions decreased to R67. Large onions traded lower on R86, mediums lower on R79 and smalls on R49. We are still on a similar trend as last year, when we saw prices dropping from current levels to about R50 in September. So expect prices to decrease further this week, especially when considering that demand can also decrease or stay on a lower level. Tomato prices increased sharply last week and traded 31% higher on R13.16 per kilogram. Large tomatoes traded at R12.76, mediums at R13.98 and smalls at R12.10. Volumes dropped off last week, which drove up prices over the past week. However, lower demand and higher supply from larger role players will drive prices down again this week. Carrot prices decreased last week to R5.82 per kilogram despite higher demand. The drop in price was due to 15% more volumes delivered on the markets week on week. Large carrots traded on R5.97, mediums on R4.98 and smalls on R4.10. We still expect supply to the markets to pick up over the next few weeks, which can keep prices in a downward trend as we head into July and August. Lower demand this week can put pressure on prices over the coming week as well. This video is proudly sponsored by Villa. Through world-class technology like Masterlock, localized for South African conditions, Villa helps you manage risk, increase productivity, and get it right the first time, backed by research that keeps you ahead. The average pepper price increased by 18% to R18.36 per kilogram. Green peppers came in at R5.99, yellow peppers increased to R33.63, and red peppers increased to R35.11. This average price is now almost 40% higher than this time last year, with volumes about 8% lower year on year. I think we can see lower prices this week, or at least over the coming week, due to this lower expected demand on the markets. Cabbage prices increased by 5% to R3.04 per kilogram and is likely to decrease slightly this week again. Garlic prices increased by 5% to R67.98, with local produced garlic now on R75.76 and imported garlic on R81.75. Garlic prices will likely remain on a higher level during July and then start trickling downward from August onwards as we expect more volumes. Spinach prices dropped to R4.21 per kilogram, while sweet potato prices decreased by 2% to R4.70 last week. Pumpkin prices increased by 10% to R3.43, while butternuts decreased to R5.79. Green beans increased to R17.11, while cucumber prices traded 22% lower on R13.17 last week. Our latest reports are also now available on our website, so go check them out at amtrends.co.za for more detailed market insights. In the fruit market, the average banana price increased by 8% to R5.98 per kilogram, which is about R108 per 18 kilogram box. The low demand this week can result in prices to decrease, especially considering that it is school holidays as well, which can put additional pressure on demand. Apple prices traded on R9.17 per kilogram, while pear prices increased slightly to R9.09. Orange prices increased by 7% to R4.43 per kilogram, which is still on a relatively lower level. We still anticipate orange prices to remain on these lower levels over the following 2 to 3 months. Avocado prices increased slightly to R15.73 per kilogram. Viertes traded on R20.07, Haas on R12.70 and Pinkertons on R13.85. Expect prices to remain around current levels until October, after which it can start to increase again as the season comes to an end. The average grape price decreased to R50.47 per kilogram. We, however, still expect grape prices to remain on a higher level in July and August due to lower volumes on the markets. Pineapple prices increased to R9.42 and is likely to bottom out during July somewhere and during August. Lemon prices decreased to R5.01, while the average blueberry price dropped to R90 per kilogram last week. This episode was proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa. For more detailed insights, forecasts and free downloadable tools, visit amtrends.co.za now. I'm Dr. Johnny van der Merwe. Thanks for tuning in and see you next week.